the oral arguments today on the ability for courts to criminalize homelessness. And the title of this one is Supreme Court to decide whether politicians can criminalize homelessness. And this is from the Rolling Stone online, April 21st. That's yesterday, by Jeremy Childs. This is these oral arguments should be happening today. And this is a story that affects a lot of people, a lot of places. Again, full links at our Mastodon. So, and it says the case pushed by left coast cities and conservatives alike ask whether it's cruel and unusual to punish people who sleep on public property. And it goes on to say the Supreme Court on Monday, that is today, will hear oral arguments in City of Grants Pass v. Johnson, a case that could essentially determine whether homelessness can be criminalized. The case stems from the city of Grand Pass, a town of roughly 40,000 in southwest Oregon, which began enforcing ordinances in 2013 that made it illegal to sleep on public property using bedding, which could mean anyone using a tent, sleeping bag, or blanket to make it through the night. Let me just say, this is me editorializing. This is happening right now this is a case dealing with Oregon. We've been talking a lot about Oregon. Oregon's becoming a very fascinating place as to a lot of things. It's a blue city, liberals sort of run the show there, like Washington State, California near there. But they're doing a lot of things that are, turning out to be maybe not that great. One of these, and in these blue states, you've got red pockets that are trying to run their own agenda, and the state is trying to stop it or make changes. I've talked about in previous video, I think 2 weeks ago, the drug problem in Oregon because they relaxed all their drug laws. And now we've got this homeless issue that they're attacking. And this is interesting because it's happening right now in Florida. It's happening, and in other places they are trying to ban people from sleeping in the streets. The city was sued by a group of homeless residents, and a federal court ruled in their favor, arguing that laws against camping were unconstitutional based on the Eighth Amendment protection against cruel and unusual punishment. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit sided with the lower court in a 2-1 decision. Grand Pass then appealed to the Supreme Court. Supporters of Grand Pass case include many conservatives who seek to remove homeless populations to boost public safety, as well as liberal leaders in West Coast cities overwhelmed by a spike in homelessness as rent prices soar. Governor Gavin Newsom of California was among the high-profile figures to file an amicus brief in the case. The United States Supreme Court can establish a balance which allows enforcement of reasonable limits on camping in public spaces while still respecting the dignities of those living in our streets, Newsom said in a statement last month. Opponents of the case, however, fear that the Supreme Court ruling expected in June could open the floodgates for jurisdictions cracking down on homeless populations. Quote, if the Supreme Court were to allow for such punitive regime, then we're going to have a race to the bottom to make it as uncomfortable as possible for people to survive. John Dew, a senior staff attorney with the American Civil Liberties Union in Northern California, tells Rolling Stone. Boise, Idaho was another city that effectively outlawed homelessness via anti-camping laws until the city was sued in 2018. The case, Martin versus Boise, reached the Ninth Circuit in 2019. The court ultimately ruled that residents without permanent shelter could not be arrested only because they were homeless, limiting how cities can respond to homeless encampments with enforcement sweeps. The decision caused leaders in cities overwhelmed with homeless residents like Los Angeles and San Francisco to side with conservatives in their support of Grand Pass case. Dew also explained the legal arguments underpinning the Grand Pass case is not just about homelessness, but whether people can be criminalized for their status instead of their actions. One of the big questions heading into today's oral arguments is whether the Supreme Court justices view being homeless as voluntary or involuntary, which was the case with the points raised by the Justice Department in a brief in support of neither party in the case. Quote, I think there may be a lot of questions on whether or not homelessness is voluntary or involuntary, Dews says, which he describes as a really troubling framing. So that is very, I find this very interesting on a number of levels. Number one is this is a situation that affects both Democrats and Republicans. You have states, blue states, that are really, California primarily, that are really being overwhelmed by the homeless situation. Of course, you've got this rent issue where the rent is so expensive, particularly in San Francisco and those other places, that people have been, become homeless, as well as, there's a whole lot of stuff, and I've talked about this before, and I will bring this back up in other episodes. But we've got to really look at what is happening with respect to banking, with respect to commercial real estate, and then how that's going to trickle down. We know inflation is still an issue, and we know some people are not buying homes, they're renting, or they're not looking to sell their home because they still have a mortgage that you can't get those rates anymore. It's so they're so low. So this really attacks, and this really affects a lot of different areas. We've got situations here in New York where you've got squatter issues here. You've got issues of tenants' rights versus owners' rights. This really hits on a lot of different areas, and I'm very curious to see what ends up. This would be precedent setting because of the implications, and depending on where the Supreme Court ends up on this. Hey there, fantastic viewers. Eric Darnley Small here, and I hope you're loving today's episode of What You Missed. You've reached the end of today's show, but don't worry, there's more show coming up. If you're watching this on YouTube, please click the bell so that you'll be notified when more content is available. You can also help the channel by clicking the like and subscribe buttons. It helps the YouTube algorithm find new viewers so that I can keep bringing you all this incredible content you enjoy. But wait, there are more ways to support the show. You can make a contribution through the show's PayPal, which goes a long way in helping produce even better content for you. And consider becoming a part of our growing community by joining our Mastodon site at mastodon.vtip.me/@whatyoumissed for more engaging discussions and exclusive updates. And here's something you won't want to miss. Mark your calendars for our live show streaming on YouTube and stream.vtip.me Monday mornings, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Your support means the world to me, and together we're making What You Missed the best it can be. Thanks for being a part of my journey.